Okay, this is block 6, the Great Depression, section 1, crash and calamity, the section starting economic calamity. The stock market crash did not cause the Great Depression. It introduced it. Just like the financial crisis of 2008 did not cause the Great Recession of 2008, it introduced it. That the weakness in the American economy was there long before the market crashed. But it was the market crashing that made people panic and worry. And when people panic and worry, they stop spending money. And when people stop spending money, the economy grinds to a halt. And that is what happened in 2008, and that is what happened in 1929. That the weaknesses that were already there were exacerbated and made worse by people, for lots of reasons. We're going to talk about some of those, but by people having no confidence anymore in the American economy. The economic calamity that struck in 1929 was unlike anything that we have experienced before or since 1929. The first thing that happened so most Americans were not invested in the stock market, 1 in 20 at the most. So the question is, how did this market crash destroy millions of Americans who had nothing at all to do with the stock market? And the answer to that question is in the local banks. Here's a good picture. This is a local bank, some city, the American Union Bank. Banks invest money also. When you deposit money in a savings account, the bank doesn't hoard that money like Scrooge McDuck back in some vault somewhere. They invest it. And the banks had invested in stocks just like everybody else. And then all of a sudden, all of that money that the banks had invested was gone. So John Q. Saver, who, him and his wife put $50 in the bank every day, every week for the 30 years they've been married, all of a sudden that money is gone. And when people start to realize that the banks don't have money, or don't have everybody's money, what you get is a run on the bank, and the bank collapses. What you see here is people lining up at the bank and saying, all right, I want my money out. Get my money out of the bank. I don't trust the bank with my money any longer. But the problem is the bank has lost everybody's money, and the bank does not have people enough money on hand to give money to the people saying, I'd like to withdraw money from my account. The money is simply not there. And this spreads like wildfire around the country. Thousands of banks fail. People's savings are wiped out. As the banks fail, banks are no longer able to lend money to businesses. Businesses start to close. Businesses start to close, people lose their jobs. Unemployment skyrockets in the United States. People aren't buying anything. Everything that the factories are making, no one's buying. So the factories can't stay open. Stores can't stay open. No one's buying anything anymore. Unemployment begins to spike. Middle-class people with good middle-class, remember, there is no Social Security, there is no unemployment insurance. If you've lost your job and the bank has lost all your money, you have nothing. Middle-class professional men are forced to sell, apples on the street corner for 5 cents an apple to passerby to pay for, food and milk for their children by the millions. People lost their homes. People couldn't afford their rent. In 2012, if you lose your job, you fill out the unemployment form, you get unemployment, you get Social Security. There was none of that in 1929. It was a different culture too. Men were expected to work. Men were expected to provide for their families. And all of a sudden they couldn't. And they walked around American cities begging for jobs, looking for jobs anywhere. And you look at another picture, this is just that men went from town to town looking for work. And here's a sign that said, jobless men, keep going. Don't even bother stopping in this town. There's no jobs in this town. They can't even take care of their own people. The last thing they wanted was strangers from other cities, other towns, stopping by and saying, I'll do anything. What kind of jobs do you have? Like, whatever you want. There was simply no work. And there was no work because no one was buying anything. And because no one was buying anything, the factories shut down. When the factories shut down, the stores that sell the stuff that the factories made shut down. The American economy, this did not happen overnight. It took about a year or two. But by 1931, the American economy has ground to a halt. It went down by 15% a year for 3 years. Most people, if they were lucky, if they had, unemployment was about 25%. 1 person in 4 was out of a job. That's a massive number. Of those who still had jobs, their hours were cut back, their wages were reduced. So even people lucky enough to still be working did not have the same standard of living as they had before the economic catastrophe hit the United States. People who lost their homes or couldn't afford their rent depended on local charity, depended on their church, depended on their family. And if they had nowhere to go, if there was not, a brother or a sister or a mom or a parent who could take them in, shanty towns grew up in every American city. In vacant lots and empty fields, people, took whatever materials they could find and built little houses for themselves and their families. And they took the name Hoovervilles after President Hoover. President Hoover was widely blamed for the collapse. He was blamed for the inability for the economy to bounce back like it usually did. And people always take out their anger on, the bad economy on the president, or usually have in American history. And President Hoover was widely blamed for the collapse. And the shanty towns came to be called Hoovervilles in honor, if you will, of President Hoover. It was a terrible time for millions of Americans. Even those who still had jobs had wages and hours cut, and for the 25% of American workers without jobs, there was very little hope, very little ability. President Hoover was always on the radio saying it's going to get better soon, it's going to get better soon, but it just was not getting better.